Hey, yo, Miggy, what's up?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Miggy Talks with a Z. I'm your host with the most, Miggy, aka Slick Jedi, aka Mighty Mouse, aka Beast Mode Activated. Now today on this show, I have a very dear and important guest. His name is Charles Sadler, also known as my grandpa. Grandpa, how you doing today?
I'm doing okay. I'm still breathing, and that's a plus.
All right, Grandpa, I love the energy. All right. So, Grandpa, I guess we should start with telling us a little bit about yourself. Like where you were born, where you've grown up, and where you reside today.
Well, obviously I was born, but I was born in Parma, Ohio. I lived there until I was about 2 years old. Then my father and mother and my 2 sisters and I moved to Akron, Ohio. Akron, the rubber capital of the world. And that's where I grew up from the time I was 2 years old until the time I left home at 18. And I went into the service between the Korean and the Vietnam War. And to be honest with you, I am glad it was in between, because I sure don't cotton to war.
Wow, Akron, Ohio. That's a pretty long ways away from here in sunny California. I noticed that you say it's the rubber state of the world. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean that they make a lot of rubber bouncy balls or a lot of rubber toys for all the kids in toy stores? Like, enlighten me a little bit. What makes it the rubber state of America?
Actually, Akron is the city rubber capital of the world, and it's the city capital rubber city of the world because all the major rubber companies were located there, and that for a long, long time was where all the rubber tires for the automobiles and the bicycles and tricycles and just about anything that had a tire, that's where they came from. And that was one of my first jobs. I worked at the Firestone Tire and Rubber Company, but I wasn't making tires. I was making beer barrels.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So not necessarily rubber for toys and whatnot, but the kind of black rubbers that you find on bicycle wheels and stuff like that. I didn't even know that that's what they were made out of. I always thought they were made out of some crazy put together piece of plastic. That's pretty cool. So what are some major events that you've been through? I mean, I know the Vietnam War is one of them. Luckily, you were able to not go and be deported into the war. But are there any other major events that have happened that you've witnessed and that you've gone through? And obviously, you're still here, so you've definitely probably got stories to tell about those.
Well, when I was around 5 years old, the World War II began and things got really tight. Everything was rationed. You couldn't just go to the store and buy whatever you wanted. You had to buy whatever they had, and you could not only buy very little of it. Kind of like what's happening right here today with the coronavirus. Things are tight. You have to take what you can get and hope for the best.
Very wise words, Grandpa. I mean, you're right. We do kind of got to just take what we got and hope for the best. With this whole coronavirus thing, they're saying social distancing is the best way to help protect your own health as well as help protect other people's health. Now, me being an extrovert, that's been not a very easy thing to do. I'm used to going out, hanging out with my buddies almost every day, going to go see my girlfriend, going to hang out. I mean, I love being around people. I love going to parties, and I love, having a really fun time. So just the fact that I've had to stay inside has been kind of tough. But in times like these, I feel feel like it's really important to know or to understand that sometimes there's things a little bit more important than selfish needs, like going out and hanging out with friends and stuff like how I want to do. So let me ask, what are some of your biggest inspirations? May it be events, may it be people in your life. Who are the people, or what is it that helped you become who you are today and has helped you make it this far in life, in your careers, in anything like that?
Well, I had an uncle, and everyone believed he was retarded. And he was a good old fellow, and every once in a while it seemed like he would be talking to himself. And he took me all kind of places and taught me how to hunt mushrooms and fish and play checkers. And that was when I was visiting with my grandma. And later on in life, they found out that just before he died, he had a tumor on his brain. And once they removed the tumor, he was perfectly okay. So when you meet someone that's a little strange or a little different, give them some slack, because it may not be what you think it is. And he taught me a lot, along with my mother and my father, and I'm just lucky to be where I am today.
Well, that definitely is something that I think we should keep in perspective, you know? I mean, as the old saying goes, don't really judge a book by its cover. There's a lot into people that some people may not know, or that some people think they know about others, just assumptions. But in the end of the day, you know, we don't really know anyone's full story. We don't really know exactly what happened from the day that they were born to where they are today. And, you know, I feel like being judgmental is a really big issue, especially something that I see in my eyes. I do the best that I can to not judge somebody by the way they wear their clothes, or the way they talk, or the way they think things out. Because, you know, everybody has their own special power, their own special talent, their own special gifts. And, you know, for some people, it may take a little more digging than others. But Grandpa, you're right. We shouldn't have to judge people just by the way they act or the way they talk. We gotta love everybody. And even from the youngest child, you can learn so much that you haven't known before. All you gotta do is keep an open mind and be optimistic about, you know, what others have to say, and learn from that. All right, Grandpa, I know this next question you told me you didn't want me to ask, but I'm gonna ask it anyways. Who are your favorite bands / artists that are your all-time favorites? You know, it doesn't matter what time period they were popular in, or if we've never even heard of them today. But I know there's a lot of people out there that are just trying to find some new music to listen to. So growing up, maybe even if you want to cut it down to a select few, what were some of your top songs that you listened when you were in college? Ages 19 through, let's say, 25. What were some of the songs that were constantly in rotation when you were listening to music?
Well, when I was growing up in the teenage and early 20s, I really wasn't too much into music. The music that I did enjoy, though, was what you would call semi-classical. But I did have a few artists that I did enjoy their songs, and one of them was Johnny Cash. I thought that he was a very, I guess you would say, I just liked his sound and his songs, the type of music that he sang. Another was a group called the Sons of the Pioneers. If a lot of you won't remember some of their songs, but one was Cool Water and the other was Tumbling Tumbleweeds. The Von Monroe and Perry Como. And one of my favorite groups was the Kingston Trio. And there was an old-timer named Burl Ives that sang a lot of ballads. And that was the type of music that I enjoyed. I liked something that had decent words that went along with a decent melody. And I got that from another one of my uncles, those that enjoyed listening to the opera. And that's, I guess, where I really got my musical background and liking for semi-classical music from.
Wow, Grandpa, that's actually pretty interesting. You know, I mean, I'm a big hip hop fan. I'm a big hip hop head. I love the beat. I love banging my head up and down, the rhythm, the way that they're poets and the way that they structure their lyrics and stuff to go in a flow and just mix and make sense all together. Like, that's my cup of tea. But it's funny how you say, you know, classical rock and your opera music and stuff. Like, that's kind of just goes to show really how the trends have changed. And I think that's pretty cool. To touch up on that, Grandpa, have you ever been to an opera? Have you ever seen any shows, opera shows, live or anything like that?
No, I unfortunately have never been able to get to a show like that. I have seen some of the Broadway shows, Cats for one, and there were a few Broadway shows that I was able to go and see, and I did enjoy them. I do like the beat on some of the modern music. It does kind of stimulate your blood system. But some of the words and the screaming and the yelling just doesn't do it for me.
Good job, Grandpa. I like the way you voiced your opinion in that. All right, Grandpa. So every time that I was a younger kid and I'd always go and visit with you, you were always cooking in the kitchen. And I remember one of my first all-time favorite breakfasts to eat was your homemade fried potatoes. When you cut the potatoes up into little itty-bitty cubes and they come out all crispy and brown and they just crunch and they're soft on the inside when I chew on them. So my question to you is, what is your favorite dish to make?
One of the favorite dishes that I like to make is what I call beef tomato. And actually it's made with more celery than it is tomato, but I just cut up a piece of round steak into slivers and cook it with a can of golden mushroom soup, add a little bit of cut up onion, get it nice and tender, then add mushrooms, celery, and the last thing I add is the tomatoes, and that goes on a bed of rice. And that's one of my favorite meals. Spaghetti isn't too bad either, I'll tell you. That's pretty much it.
Nice. That actually sounds pretty good and scrumdiddlyumptious. So In-N-Out is hands down one of my favorite places to go and eat because the burgers are fresh, they taste great, it's made in front of you, you can see how they make it, and In-N-Out's really good, really good to eat. And one of my top things to order from there is a 4x4 animal fries and a strawberry milkshake. So Grandpa, growing up, especially in like your 19 and 20 years of age, what was your favorite place to go and eat? Or it doesn't even have to be in that age range, just your all-time favorite. If you could give a recommendation to somebody that wants to go out and get a good bite to eat, where would that be and why?
Well, actually, you got to remember that I was a teenager back in the 1950s and the early part of that 1950s, too. And we didn't have places like Jack in the Box or Burger King or Carl's Jr. We didn't even have pizza shops at the time. And so we had what they called drive-ins, where you actually drove your car in and parked it, and a attendant would come out and take your order and then bring it out to the car. And that was the big deal when I was a teenager, was to go to the drive-in, and because that's where all the teenagers hung out. But there just wasn't really any place that I could really say that I went or liked eating out. My mom cooked some really good meals, and that was good enough for me. Sometimes we'd have hot dogs, and sometimes we'd have hamburgers, but it was always at home.
Yeah, you know, you're right, Grandpa. I mean, honestly, nothing can really beat Mom's cooking. Nothing in the world, especially Mom's cookies. Those are some of the best cookies you could ever eat. So I remember you telling me when you growed up, a lot of the sports you guys would play would be sports that you and a bunch of your neighborhood friends on the block would just get together and put together. There were no necessarily leagues for you like how there are today. Growing up, I went to East Long Beach Pony League, and I played there when I was 4 till about 12 years old. And after that, I played at Whaley Park League from 13 to 14, and then I did my high school ball, and now I'm playing college ball. But there weren't as many, if any, leagues growing up back in the day, like, you know, with baseball and even flag football and stuff how they have now. So growing up, you know, what was your favorite sport, and how did you play them? Matter of fact, were there any leagues that you know of growing up as a kid?
When I was growing up, there wasn't any organized sporting events that the young people could participate in. Mainly, what we would do is just get up what they call pickup games today. And I was fortunate enough to live in an area where we had about roughly 10 or so boys that were the same age as my two brothers and I. And we would choose up sides every day during the summertime and play baseball. Sometimes we'd have only 3 people on a side. It depended on who showed up and when. But it was a lot of fun, and we had some good games. But my favorite sport is definitely football. I love playing football, and I can remember the first time I played in a pickup game with some of the older boys. I came up to about their waist, and we always played tackle. And I don't know how many times I got a heel of somebody's foot in my eye trying to tackle them while they were running. I'd go home, and my mother was generally in the basement because back there they have basements, and that's where the laundry area was. And coming from a family of 6 children, Mom spent a lot of time down in the basement doing the laundry. And I'd go down there, and she'd see me with my black eye, and she would call me Chucky. She'd say, "Chucky, not again." And we didn't have a refrigerator. We had an ice box. Tells you how old I am. Anyway, she'd go into the ice box and chip off a chunk of ice and wrap it up in a little bitty towel, and I'd walk around for about an hour or so with that ice piece on my eye until the ice melted, and then go back out and play football again.
Nice. Sounds like a very efficient way to take care of boo-boos and bruises. So, Grandpa, who's your favorite football team? And when did you start liking that football team? And why did you start liking that football team?
Well, being from Ohio, back in the day, when in the 50s, there weren't as many teams in the Professional Football League as there are today. But one of the best teams ever to play football were the Cleveland Browns. They had a quarterback that came out of Northwestern University, and his name was Otto Graham. And he was, in my opinion, one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever play the game, and he set a lot of the practices that the players use today, along with his coach, whose name was Paul Brown. They had a team that was unbeatable, and they were in what they called the American Conference at the time, and there was like maybe 6 in their conference. And year after year, they were the champions. And right around 1952, they were incorporated into what is now the National Football League. And the very first year, they played the Los Angeles Rams for the championship. And they won. And nobody could believe that this team from this little bitty league could beat a professional team like the Rams. And that just shows you how great this team was. They had some players that had little nicknames like Max Speedy, he was a receiver. And Dante Gluefingers Lavelli, he was a receiver. And Edgar Special Delivery Jones, he was a halfback. And I remember Marion Motley, and there was a guy by the name of Dub Jones, the Jones brothers. Well, actually, they weren't brothers, but they were the two halfbacks. They didn't have wideouts and some of these other positions that they call now. They had two halfbacks, a fullback, and a quarterback, two ends, and they played like holy heck. And that was the Cleveland Browns. Quarterback I loved recently was Archie Manning, and I was for whatever team he played on. I thought that he was a super player, but there are some really, really outstanding young quarterbacks playing the game today, and it's going to be a real shame if they're not able to participate in the game this year due to the outbreak of the disease. But someday, hopefully, everything will get back to normal, but it will take time.
Wow, Grandpa, those are some pretty cool nicknames. Actually, pretty entertaining nicknames to add to that. So, growing up, I would spend a lot of time in the backyard with my siblings, playing different games, maybe playing some wiffle ball, just trying to stay active. I remember going to skate parks and trying to do kick flips and ride the rails with my skateboard a lot. Of course, I was playing on various different baseball teams. Just recently been making music, and I've started this podcast show. I've been writing blogs, just trying to keep myself busy and do some things and try to progress myself towards somebody that I really want to be as, you know, an influencer or a mentor to other younger kids. So growing up, what were some of the hobbies / things that you would love to do growing up, whether it be, you know, with your family or with some of your buddies, or just you wake up one day and we're like, man, you know, I want to go out and, you know, fill in the blank. You know, what were some things that you did?
Well, right after I got out of high school, I bought a motorcycle. I enlisted in the Navy with my good friend, Buddy, when we were juniors in high school. And that was during the Korean War. And fortunately, I was in the reserves. And I was assigned to, or both of us were assigned to a unit that had just returned from Korea. So I don't know if it was luck or somebody was just really watching out for us, because there would have been a chance of us having to go overseas. So after I got out of high school, I went to college for a while, but like I say, there wasn't too many places that young people could really find a job. I worked as an usher for a while for a movie theater. I worked as a pin setter. And I even worked in a grocery market and a produce for a while. And I worked for Firestone Tire and Rubber Company. Like I said earlier, we weren't actually making the beer barrels. We were repairing the beer barrels. But they'll build beer barrels. Anyway, I got laid off it was a so-called recession, and Firestone laid off a lot of people, and so did all the other rubber companies, and things were getting kind of tight. But I had my motorcycle. Gasoline was 18 cents a gallon, so a couple of my buddies and I kind of toured Ohio and saw what it was like. And then finally, I went on active duty. It turned out that right after high school, the war in Korea was over, and I went on active duty for 3 years at Los Alamitos in California. And after I got out, I went back home, and all the girls I knew were married, and all my buddies I hung out out with were married, so I decided the best bet for me was to go sightseeing and hopefully end up in California and somehow land a job, which I was lucky enough to do. And so in 1958, I returned to Southern California, and I got a job with a chemical company. I worked for them for 14 years. Then I got a job with the County of Orange, and I worked as a building inspector for 25 years. And in the meantime, I got married and had two beautiful little girls that are really, really super women today. Anyway, I was able to buy a boat, a sailboat, so I did a lot of sailing, and I fished off the sailboat. For a while I had a motorcycle out here, but mainly I just settled down when I was 31 years old. That's when I got married, and I was ready for the family life, and I can tell you that I really enjoyed it, and I still am enjoying it today.
Wow, that's some good stuff. You were talking about having a fishing boat, and one of your favorite pastimes was going out and going fishing. So you and I, we've been watching this show lately called River Monsters, where a guy goes out and he's pretty much an extreme fish investigator. He likes to travel the world and look into human disappearances, whether it being eaten by fish or certain body parts getting eaten by fish, pretty much predatorial fish that have gone into the liking of how humans taste. So, Grandpa, along your fishing trips on your boat, have you ever encountered any dangerous fish that in a blink of an eye could just wiggle its way and bite your whole hand off? Or what are some of the craziest fishing experiences or anything of that nature that you've ever experienced?
I had a 22-foot sloop sailboat. And when I was working for the chemical company, we worked a shift of days, a shift of what we called swing shift, and then the graveyard shift. And it varied to where you did the three basically every month. So when I was working the graveyard shift, a lot of times I'd go home and whip up a little breakfast and then head down to the boat and just set sail and start taking off. And I had my fishing pole. I used a jig that I basically trolled behind the boat while I was sailing. And I could kind of lay down on the boat with the pole over my shoulder and just watch the sail. As long as the sail head was full of air, then I knew I was on course. And then I'd look to see where the seagulls were circling, because they're after the anchovies that are chased up to the surface of the water by the larger fish. So I would sail underneath them with my fishing pole and jig on the end of the fishing pole, and I would catch a fish, a bonita, probably somewhere between 8 and 12 pounds every time I went through. But this one time, I'm sailing, and I didn't realize I had my line out so far behind the boat, and I saw some pelicans circling around with the seagulls, and all of a sudden, this pelican dove for the water, and my reel started to spin. And the next thing, I jump up and I'm looking, and by golly, I caught a pelican. Fortunately, the pelican was able to get off and got away. But that was one experience that I don't think you get too often. Another time I was sailing and I just was relaxing, and I had my arm over the side of the boat and kind of dragging it into the water while I was relaxing in the cockpit, and all of a sudden something came up out of the water, and it kept coming up and kept rolling over, and I looked and I'm patting this thing on the back, and it was a whale. And it startled me so bad I jumped up in the boat and I started yelling, "Whale, whale, whale!" And I looked around and I'm out at sea and there's nobody around. But that was quite an experience. And another time I was sailing, and there was a bunch of porpoises swimming by. And my boat, I had a foghorn that you had to blow into. And so I gave it a couple of toots. Pretty soon, the dolphins were swimming around the boat. And so I was just sailing along, and they're just on both sides of me, bouncing up and down in the water. And after a few minutes, I guess they got tired of it and started to take off for better things to do, I guess. So I just picked up my foghorn again and gave a couple of toots, and they turned around and came back. And so I did, after that, I just kind of let them follow me for a while and then take off. But probably the hairiest experience I had what they called a Malibu 12-foot sailboat, which was an outrigger, and it had a main pontoon and a kind of an outrigger, smaller pontoon, and it would sail really, really fast. But it had a hatch in the main pontoon that I could put the extra line when you trim the sail. There was a lot of extra line, and so I just moved the hatch back and threw the line in there so it wouldn't trail in the water. And I wasn't paying really too much attention, and I had what they call kind of like a rooster tail, where the boat was moving so fast it took a spray of water off the bow and was kind of washing back over the back of the boat. And unbeknownst to me, the water was going into where I had the hatch pulled back a little bit, and the doggone boat sank. Out in the middle of the water, halfway almost, well, not halfway, but quite a ways between Long Beach and the island. And the boat came to a stop, and I was still sitting on it with water. The boat was down far enough to where the water came up to my neck. And so I got off the boat, and the boat popped up out of the water and started to take off, and I was able to grab a hold of the line that now was out of the hatch and hang on to it, pull myself back to the boat. And as soon as I got on it, it stopped and sank again up to my neck. And I could barely see the pier at Long Beach, and I knew there were lifeguards there. So I gave the international signal, as I knew it, and I kept signaling them, and all of a sudden I was able to see them coming down the rope, and I knew they were coming after me, and they rescued me and towed the boat back into shallow water where I could bail it out, and went back sailing again.
Wow, Grandpa, I didn't know all that happened. You've had almost pelican for dinner and almost drowned in the water. That's crazy. Yeah. So, Grandpa, we're getting close to the end of our interview. I just want to first off say thank you for, coming and being on the show and sitting down and talking with me and sharing all your stories and everything. So just to wrap this show up, tell us a little something about yourself that not too many people know about, that no one has really ever asked, and you just kind of want to get it out that, hey, not too many people know this about me, but I think you should know.
No, I'm pretty much just the average dull guy that got married and had a family and enjoyed the heck out of it. And before that, I did a lot of stupid stuff that somehow I managed to survive. And I know you young people out there are probably going to do the same thing. And my advice is, whatever you do, please don't do drugs. There's a lot of other little things you can do, but the drug part is just, in my opinion, the worst thing that has ever happened to the human race. And I'm content with with the life I had. If I could do it over again, I believe I would. I'd try to improve on some of the areas that obviously everyone needs to improve on something. And I know that I know I have areas that need improvement, but you just do the best you can every day and be faithful to yourself and to your family. And have fun, but be careful and take care of yourself.
Wow, some real words of wisdom right there. Thanks a lot, Grandpa, for being on the show. Ladies and gentlemen, if you have any comments, just please leave them down below. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. You can follow me on Instagram at LBC Miggy. That's LBCMIGGY. I usually post all my podcasts and musics there. And you can also follow my fitness count at Attaboy Miggs. That's ATTABOYMIGGS. And thanks for tuning in. And I hope you have an amazing rest of the week.
Straight